My name is Stephen Bird. I was a guide for 20 years until last year. I woke up on my 71st birthday and I realized I had a perfect safety record. And I thought, this might be a good time to retire. I don't think I have enough ass on me if I have to save anybody anymore. So then I got a job as associate editor at Swing the Fly, and I'm the author of Trout Spey and the Art of the Swing. And if you don't have this book, you can order it from Swing the Fly online. I guess I got a half hour, so we're not going to cover everything about Trout Spey, but we're going to talk about meeting hatches with soft hackle flies. A lot of people, let me do a little quick survey here. How many of you guys practice Trout Spey once in a while or at all? Show of hands. I can see you. Very few. How many are you interested in here to listen to a talk because you might be interested in taking it up? All right, good. So a lot of people that first get into Trout Spey make the mistake of thinking it's a scaled down version of steelhead fishing. And it does work that way. You can work it that way. You can fish lure type flies and just swing them like you would for steelhead. And that's one way you can approach it. But the difference between anadromous fish and inland trout is trout are eating. Most of the time they're eating bugs. You can meet them. You can swing streamers and imitate natural forage fish or sculpins, really good ones. But like most of the time, just like, as they're eating bugs and you want to meet the hatch. And the best way to meet the hatches of small insects is with soft hackle flies, spiders, flimps, stuff like that. It's not an imitative approach, it's a simulative approach, which is great. You don't need to be an entomologist. It's good to have basic knowledge of insects, know the difference between a stonefly, a caddis, and a mayfly. But other than that, you don't need to speak Latin or carry a suitcase full of imitative flies with you when you go. I'm going to have to dispel a myth right here, right now. A lot of times you hear people say or write online that small light rods are for soft hackle flies. And it's not true. I live on the Upper Columbia River, which is the third largest river in the U.S. And we regularly fish number 14 soft hackles on 16-foot 9 weights, 7 weights to 9 weights, so you can cover the water. So it's always match the rod to the water and the fish you're liable to encounter. It's not about the size of the fly. It's not like, well, I'm using a small fly, so I need to use a small light rod. It's just not true. So that said, so when we can nymph, anything you can do with a single hander, you can do with your double hander. If you want to bobber fish, you can do that. You can bobber nymph with your two-hander. If you do, I suggest a wool indicator, pre-soaked in a pre-soak like Flyagra or something to keep it floating good. And they'll cast a lot better than a plastic bobber will if you do that. And my own preference is to swing the nymph, and the way I do that is I brought this rod to show you, pointed at people, and what I have on here is a lot of you guys that are old timers probably remember high stick nymphing. And I'm tangle this up here. So this is basically like that. It's a little different though, where you use a split shot, right? And what this is, where two flies are allowed, this is what I call a depth charge worm. Okay, and this is you can fish the water with this, or really good for fishing pre-hatches. Before if you got a reliable caddis hatch, for example, they're pretty reliable, coming off every night, there's going to be a period before you start to see any surface action where they're feeding on the nips down deeper. And when I do that, I have this instead of a split shot. It's called a depth charge worm. It's a number 4 TMC 200R hook that's got a split shot worth of lead wrapped on the shank. Then it's overwrapped with a rubber band out of your junk drawer. It's painted with a felt marker. This one's pink. Looks like an annelid worm that's found in all streams. The great thing about this is it doesn't cast like a split shot. Because of its shape, it comes up out of the water in planes. It doesn't plow like a split shot to interfere with your cast. So it gets right down, and with the weight on the shank on this particular hook, the 200R, it drifts with the point up. So, and then off of that, 16 to 20 inches, I have a small, unweighted spider. This one's a partridge and hare's ear. And that one right there will cover a lot of different hatches. For Spey, I don't use anything smaller than a number 14 hook, straight eye hook, like the Yorkshiremen do. And you can tie directly to the eye with it, and the fly will still track straight without. If you tie it with a down eye hook, the popular down eye hook is made to be tied on with a turtle knot. If you don't use a turtle, they don't work right. So straight eye, go directly to the eye with a loop knot or a blood knot. And no weight at all on this one. This one's down. This one's a puppet on a string doing a dance as this one takes it down. So it's got better action than, you could use a bead head for doing that, but I find this to be more effective than a bead head. And the worm itself actually gets a pretty good number of fish as well. So you got a chance with that too. Catches more fish than a split shot. And this, you would, when you present this, I mean the difference in trout, if anybody's familiar, the pre-bobber days with the wet fly swing, the classic wet fly swing starts at 90 degrees. Place your fly at 90 degrees or whatever. Water and geology is not going to let you always do that, but as a general rule, like, a lot of guys for steelhead, they want to throw down at 45, activate the fly right away. I don't understand why they want to activate the fly right away, because if you throw it at 90, it's going to sink a little bit more for you. You're going to get more penetration. By the time everything squares away and it's at 45 degrees, it's activated and working anyway. So I don't know why people want to be in a hurry to get the fly activated, but whatever. So that's that. So you throw this at 90, mend if you have to, and let it sink. That gives it a chance to sink. This is for fishing the pre-hatch. Get down there, and then get it. It'll all square away and come snug, and so you have contact with the fly, and then just finish out the swing as you would swinging for steelhead. Another thing, difference between trout and steelhead is I do activate my fly for steelhead, but trout like the fly activated a little bit more, as a rule of thumb. Sometimes not, but mostly they do. And when I activate the fly with short pumping the line. Keep your rod low so you're in contact with the fly. You don't want your rod up like this so you have an L going down to the water. You want to keep it low to the water, maybe 4 inches off the water. Very short pulls, like this, 3-inch pulls. You pump it. Call that the pump. And that's what that's going to do, that little soft hackle. It's just going to flex that guy and activate him, right? You don't want to do it too much. You don't want to be too aggressive. You don't ever want to make it so it's doing things that a natural insect can't do, right? So just that little 3-inch short pump while it's swinging, while it's under tension, is just going to activate that soft hackle fly like that, make it look like it's swimming or emerging. So that'll get you a lot more fish, is working that pump. You can pump the rod if you want, But I find it better to leave the tip in that low position, work that pump. Don't point it directly out, give it a slight angle towards the bank, right? So you're using a light tippet with that, and you don't want the fish to be able to pull straight on you. So you want a little bit of an angle while you're doing that. Keep it towards the bank is better. That way, if you do set, you don't want to ever, when you're swinging, do a hard hook set like you would when you're bass fishing, right? Don't do that. Just, you want to come up tight. You want to draw the hook into the fish. Feel them up tight. When it comes up tight, then just swing your rod towards the bank as you're feeling it into them. Never jerk the hook into them. So you go through the pre-hatch with this rig, then you start to see some surface action. Usually with trout, the action in the river is going to be, it's not a step and swing situation. They're going to be concentrated on certain areas, mostly on seams, places where the water neutralizes, and it's easy for them to be and get food. That's where the hatches, where the insects gather, seams along eddies. You very rarely find them in a back eddy. So look for that. You'll see where it is. When you see that happen, and I've seen people do this actually, keep fishing right on down through it, right on by where the fish are rising. Because they're spey fishing, of course, and they're walking down the bank. Never do that. You got some hatching, fish feeding actively, stay right there on them. However, don't throw straight into them. What you want to do is position yourself on the bank at 45 degrees from where you see the fish feeding, right? Throw your cast at 90, let the flies drift down into them. Never throw it right on them. If you throw at 90, you're going to be way upstream from them. You start throwing it at them, just the commotion from your cast and just your vibe is going to put them down. So throw it at 90, let the line gather itself up and get right. By the time it gets to 45, where the fish are, the fly's going to be fishing right. Another good technique is as you come into them, does everybody have that, understand that, what I'm saying? Okay. I'm going to do a discussion here, and it's like, if anybody wants to ask a question while I'm going, just go ahead and raise your hand or say, hey, you, if I'm not looking or whatever. Yes, sir. Okay, the line is going to depend. You can use any line. The line is going to depend on the size of the water you're fishing and the rod you're using. So you can use it, no problem. The Skagit, I would say no. I would say a Scandi, or depending on the rod, on the Columbia, we're fishing mid-belly spays on 14 to 16 foot rods. That's not going to be the case anywhere you go. Well, yeah, let me digress to your question for a little bit. This rod right here is a 12 foot 5 weight. Okay, it's one that I find the most versatile for me. This would be a good rod for the Missouri, a river the size of the Missouri. I was out to Madison last year. The guides there, for perspective, were fishing 11 and a half foot 3 weights on the Madison. So if any of you are familiar with that, the Madison, the size of it, that rod's just right for it. The 3 weight, 11 and a half foot 3 weight. The guys like them a little longer. A lot of people show up with 10 and a half footers. There's not a lot of obstacles behind you there, so you're going to have more command of the stream with an 11 and a half foot rod. The Scandi rod, for the Skagit for hatches, I would say no. Yeah, if you didn't have anything else, you could put a long floating tip on it and use it, sure, get by with it. But ideally, you would want a short, a belly that matches the rod, full floating line, and a Scandi. Scandi should probably be, if you're only going to have one, that'd probably be a good way to go. So anybody else on that one?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to the 10-6 rods. What kind of line
Like a 10-6? Okay. Okay. I'm going to say this about switch rods. In my book, is I actually went to Bob Miser, who coined the term to begin with. And the term derives from the fact that he built some light rods for half-pounders in Southern Oregon. And he went out with some buddies that were single-hand guys. They found some fish. The single-hand guys couldn't reach him. So they took turns using Bob's rod, switching it around. That's where the term came from. Okay? Then the marketers picked up on it. Oh, this is a snazzy term for light Trout Spey rods. But I'll say this. A two-hander is a two-hander is a two-hander. Switch don't mean anything. Yeah, the light ones you can switch from a two-hander to single-hand casting. Marketers thought that'd be really great for guys just getting into it. They'd be able to switch and cast it single-handed. So they took their word and they redefined it. Okay? But now if you back to your question about what line would I use on a 10.5-foot rod, I would use a short head on that. In fact, if you got down to where you're using one that small, that light, I'll say this too about light rods, up to 4 weight, say, I would suggest an integrated line, fully integrated line. Because a lot of places you're going to be fishing, you might want to fish streamers, right? So you can strip them. You're stripping them a lot. You want to strip them in close. It's a smaller stream. So you're going to be able to cast across the stream. And I'd say if you can cast across the stream, or almost across it, you're probably better off with an integrated line. You know, integrated floating line. So there's a lot of good ones available. Nobody's paying me to give you a brand name, so you can research it. So, yeah, I'd go. In fact, the Madison, for example, the guys there from the Yellowstone Fly Shop, they do a lot of Trout Spey. They're fishing fully integrated lines. So, you could use it. If I was going to use a head, I'd go a short head that casts well, right? So, but again, the Skagit, no. On that one. So now we're meeting the hatch. Does anybody else have any questions on lines or rods on that? Yeah.
Have you had any experience with the Scandi body?
The Scandi body?
Yeah.
I've used Scandi lines. What exactly do you mean by the Scandi body?
They have a Scandi reel and they cut the tip off of it.
Oh, okay.
And it's their Scandi body.
All right, okay. You're making a head out of your Scandi line.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd say try it. Get one that works good for you with your small rod.
Yeah.
Sure. Start cutting. Start out a little long though. Don't start real short. You can always take more off, but you know it's hard to put any more back on without having to knot. So, yeah, if that's your, you know, this is to each his own pleasure, sir. I would say on that. So, what I say is not inscribed in stone. So, you know, experiment definitely. That's what's so great about our game, is it gives us the chance to do so much experimenting at the kitchen table, you know, and other things. It's not all about just fishing. There's just so much we can do. Playing with the equipment, making lines. I went through a line cutting stage that was atrocious and costly, but yeah. If you're going really like that, I know there's like 1 and 2 weight Spey rods available. They're on the market. Myself, I'm going to say this, I hope I don't piss anybody off, but I think they're basically useless. If you're down to something that small and that light, you can probably do it with a single-hander, okay? So I'd say the same thing about dry fishing too. A lot of people are excited about dry fly fishing with their Spey rod. I reserve the dry fly fishing to skater style and bomber style flies. In fact, you can meet like the drake hatches, the green drakes. I haven't fished them on the Henry's Fork, but we got a really good drake hatch on the Upper Columbia. And June. And a couple years ago, we discovered using bombers that are tied in their coloration with a split wing. And oh my God, those things work so good. Pre-soak them at the bench and Viagra. You know, you don't have to, that's the problem with fishing dries with a Spey rod. Small dries, you gotta dry them out. It's awkward, you know, to dry them out, but false casting. But the, the bombers on the drake hatches are really fun. The larger insects, October caddis, you know, what we call skater patterns, work really well for them. I'm not really sure I like the word skater because it kind of creates a vision of the fly just skating across the water, you know, like crazy. And so sometimes that works. I've found even for steelhead, really, the fly works better dead drifted and just twitched an inch or so now and then. I guess you could call that the skate, the 1 inch skate, right? For trout, definitely a dead drift. And if you got enough hand control, you can give them a little 1 inch pull now and then, and that's about it. If they see the thing skating across the water, they're thinking it's getting away. Your odds are gonna increase, go way down. The odds of catching fish is gonna go down if you start skating that thing across the water for trout. They really do prefer it, just as you would with a single hand. You know, try to keep it dead drifting. But the larger floaters, is for myself anyway, I strictly stay with larger floaters when fishing dries with my two-hander. If it's small mayflies and stuff like that, I get out the single-hander, man. So, you know, because I need to dry them with false casts. So, so we want to start that swing at 90. Does anybody have any more questions on that? Yeah. The what again? I'm sorry.
The lift.
Oh, the lift. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to get into that before I got off the track here. Yeah, okay. As our fly is approaching, our soft hackle fly is approaching where the fish are at 45 degrees, okay, down the bank, there's 45 degrees there, so that's where the fish are. So I'm going to cast here at 90, let it drift down into them. Okay, as it comes in, when you think it's where they are, right, here's the Leisenring lift, and I see this described wrong. A lot of people think the Leisenring lift comes at the end of the cast, which is actually the dangle. You know, you're down at the end of your cast. That's not the Leisen, and then you lift the rod at the end of the cast, right? All that does is, your fly's already in shallow when it's at the end of the cast. If you lift the rod, it's just going to move towards you. It's not going to really lift. It's already lifted by the time it gets there. The real Leisenring lift is, as the fly's approaching the fish, or when you think it's into the fish, you stop. You follow the fly. Follow the fly with your rod tip. When you come up tight, you be following it. When you think it's where or approaching where the fish are, stop the rod. When you stop the rod, the fly's going to lift. You don't lift the rod. The fly lifts. That's the Leisenring lift, right straight out of his book. So, and that is an incredibly effective technique. It's very, very subtle, because maybe the fly's only 3 inches beneath the surface. But when you stop it, it's going to rise. The fish are all feeding right there on the surface anyway. So it might only rise 2 or 3 inches, right, when you stop it, but that's what the emergers are doing. So that's an incredibly effective technique, and it's really good if you get into fishing hatches with your two-hander, really get into the habit of doing that. It works also if you're fishing blind, if you're fishing spots, right? Hot spots, you think there's a fish there. You can do it with your streamer even. Because when you think your fly's where those fish are, stop the swing. When you do that, whatever you have on the end is going to rise some. It's going to activate, right? So that's going to trigger a fish, or it might trigger a fish. So it's always good to practice that. You know, if you got a boulder spot, you think there might be a fish, you know, in front of that boulder or behind it, right? the drifter fly in there and just let it come up tight and stop, right? And the fly will activate and come up a little bit. That might trigger them. So it's good. It's a good practice even when you're not fishing hatches. But excellent on hatches. How far into this am I? Any more questions on that? Yeah.
Different question.
Sure.
Just leader construction.
Right. I like a longer leader generally than one might use for steelhead, except, with a floating line like here on the Clearwater, we're using long leaders. We're fishing 15 to 20 foot leaders with long bellied lines. But for trout, I like a leader. It depends on the size of the water. Again, like on the Columbia, I'm fishing a leader that's between 12 and 15 feet, okay? Small stream, that might be too much. Another thing, it might be too much for a shorter rod too, so you can stick with rod length. I go like 8 foot to 15 foot, depending on the water. So I would say as a general rule of thumb is go with the longest leader you can cast and get away with, okay, just for practical purposes. I like the heaviest tippet I can get away with as well. The fish hit hard on the swing, especially down at the bottom of the swing, even if you got a little bit of angle on them. That's where you're going to be most off to get broke off by a good fish. And this is a hard one sometimes. Like up on the Columbia, there's a chance of catching a fish over 30 inches on a number 14 spider. So, and I've done it. And but you want to get bit too. So you're kind of always in a dilemma. There's big fish there, but if you go over 6 pound test, you're not going to get bit, especially when they're really keyed on the hatch. So you gotta, I would say as a rule of thumb, you know what size fish to expect in any given water that you're fishing. Lead or you tip it, make your tippet accordingly. It's go as light as you can get away without being ridiculous and in danger of being broke off. Go ahead.
Fluoro?
Yes, I like fluoro. I like mono on my, I buy store-bought mono leader butts. I like the, manufacturers might hate me for this. I like the cheap Cortland ones you can buy at Walmart. They have a lot of elasticity, a lot of stretch. They're very relaxed, they're great. I'll buy one of those that's about tapered 7 or 8 feet, put a rigging ring on that, and then build the rest off the ring. That way, you're not wasting leaders. When you change tippets, you tie to the ring, you got a fresh one. You don't have to, every time you tie, you're losing leaders. So I really highly, highly recommend using rigging rings. They don't get in the way of anything. Yes, I use a swivel here. I'm using a very tiny, tiny swivel here. If I'm swinging larger flies, I do use a tiny swivel. The little spros are really good. If you got fishing a lot of faster water, you tend to get more twist. So yeah, swivel's a good idea. That was a good question. Anybody else on that? Yeah.
Tandem wets.
Tandem wets?
Yeah.
I fish them, and I fish them just that way, tandem. It's the cleanest way to cast them, I found. Everybody know what tandem is when you got your dropper tied off the bend of the hook on your forward fly.
Are you putting it on the bend of the hook?
Yes.
Always? Not on the
Always.
eye? Not on
No,
the
because if you put it in the eye, sometimes on the cast, not every cast is perfect, at least in my case. And sometimes it'll go over that and it'll tangle in there and you got to keep checking it all the time. I found it stays a lot cleaner just tied on the bend myself. I kind of don't fish tandems a lot anymore just because, but definitely when I do, it's that way. That's the way this is tied up. That dropper is just tied off the bend of that worm, that depth charge worm. So yeah. But If you're having good luck tying them another way, though, I would say go for it. You know, but
Just drop her off the tippet ring, right?
you can tie a. That's a good question. Yeah, good suggestion. That's very true. You can tie a second one off of the tippet ring itself. Be rig like you would use for short line high stick nymphing, right? And yeah, that works great. Especially if you're fishing a smaller stream where you're making short casts, where you don't have a lot of chance to tangle, everything's fishing pretty clean and close to you. That's a really good setup. It's a really good setup. Especially two soft tackle flies, they swim really well on that. They're better than the tandem, actually. I actually think that's a better rig than the tandem, except it tangles more. So, yeah. Anybody else on any of that?
Any unusual knots that you use for these rigging?
No. When I splice my leader together, I just use a regular, blood knot. To tie the ring on, I like a San Diego knot. It's clean, and the tag comes straight up parallel with the line. There's another name for that. I'm from California, we call it a San Diego knot. There's another name for that. But that's a good knot. It's also a good knot for tying your fly on too. Or I use a loop knot. For the real tiny flies on a light leader, I don't use a loop knot because it gives too much bulk at the front of the fly. That's why I like a straight eye. I like to fasten straight to the eye with that, especially with light tippet. So yeah. Anybody else have any burning questions? A real burning question. Anybody got one? Are you the guy I gave the spot to last night? No? Okay. Anyway, anybody else? All right. So, I was asked at the last minute to do this presentation. I was not even ready, so I'm just rambling. So anyway, we can pass this around. If anybody wants to look through the fly section on this, there's about 200 flies in here for Trout Spey that we put together because we think these are patterns that define Trout Spey. You won't find a single mini intruder in here. Might be a good fly somewhere, but it's not magic. So anyway, you want to look at that or pass it around? Anybody? Anybody else have any questions? Nobody has a question? My talk was that good that I answered everything?
What's your favorite fly, Steve?
My favorite fly is the woodcutter. For fish in the water, it's in that book. It developed off the old olive and brown woolly worm, which was a really great fly when I was a kid. And then I couldn't leave well enough alone. And I started getting into looking at Irish flies and stuff. So I added a golden pheasant tippet tail to the thing. Next thing I knew, I had to have a couple collars on the front of it, and it just turned. And then I gave up on the chenille woolly worm body and went to, dubbing in a loop. So it altered quite. In fact, I got one stuck in my hat right here. If you want to look at it, works actually good on this river too. And I gave some of these to one of my clients that lives on the snake. He said he thought it was the most killing fly he ever used on the snake. You guys can pass that around too, but make sure I get it back. I'm down to one. That's the last one. Anyway, you have a question for me. I know you do. You had to go. No, you all done? All right. I don't want to get into anybody else's time. Have I been talking for a half hour yet? No. Maybe? All right.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah. Good? All right.
Steve,
Yeah.
I never heard really much about this, but you now have me interested in.
What's that now? Excuse me.
I've never really heard anything on this before. You have me interested in doing this for trout now. So, thank you.
All right. Good. Sorry to hear it. There's already too many of us out there. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot, guys. A great day. If any of you guys are fishing, I hope you have good luck. Thanks a lot.